Hello and welcome to today's webinar on unregistered lands, supported here by Nimbus Maps Elite. In effect, this is a new feature that we've just put into to Nimbus Maps Elite, and in fact in the Essentials account, product as well. Really, just to run through what that unregistered land is all about. So there's a bit of background in terms of unregistered land. The land registry changed their registration policy back in 1998, I believe, where it then became compulsory to register land and buildings as and when they were sold. So any properties that are pre-1998, where ownership was held, or kind of when properties were bought back in sort of 1990 or whatever, so before that 1998 date, then those properties then are not necessarily registered, which means that if you go to the land registry and ask the land registry who owns that property, they won't know. So the key thing about unregistered land is kind of becomes a bit of a black hole, really, because actually if I want to go and contact the owner or research that building or kind of understand what the property ownership or the outline, the boundaries and this sort of stuff look like, the traditional approach of going to land registry, or indeed kind of the new school way of doing it, system like Nimbus Maps, that no longer is available to you. So the land registry will come back to you and say, no idea who owns this. How about you go and knock on the door of the owners and see whether they want to speak to you or not. So the world's now moved on, and what I'd like to do is just show you how that works in Nimbus Maps. Just going to show you my screen. This was my research here, just on Wikipedia, sort of looking at the date at which the registration became compulsory. In Nimbus Maps, this is Nimbus Maps Elite here, and what I wanted to do was a location that's kind of close to my heart is Cambridge. So with Nimbus Maps Elite and indeed Nimbus Maps Essentials, which is the free version, obviously, so Nimbus Maps Essentials is completely free. You can use that as much as you want to. For free. In effect, what Nimbus Maps does is it goes off in that location search, finds where the center of that location is. This is the center of Cambridge as far as Google's concerned, shows that with a little blue pin, and then plots the ownership around that location within 250 meters of that spot. And that's the same as a default for Elite, and also Essentials uses that same 250 meter radius. With Elite, I can do some clever stuff. I can search in bigger areas, and I can apply some filters. So I can do some company search and look at kind of what companies own, this sort of stuff. But both platforms, both the free and the paid for platform, show that unregistered land. And that unregistered land is these little kind of U's here. And where they become really interesting, I'm just going to nudge this across and do a search in kind of the residential area just behind sort of the town centre, in effect. Where those become interesting is where they go yellow on the map. So what we can see in our product, in effect, is where a property here is unregistered. You can see very clearly the sort of the ownership and the freehold titles that have been registered with the land registry, these red outlines here. And you can see all these sort of houses and things that have been registered, and obviously one standing out in the middle that isn't registered, and that's sort of then showing us that U coming up on the screen there. So when we click anything in Nimbus Maps, we have the left-hand side panel comes up. And obviously unregistered land doesn't have a huge amount of information about it because it's unregistered. There's kind of all there is purely an address, and from that address, we are as a platform able to link some interesting stuff back to that address. Where you sort of see that sort of most powerfully is when it goes yellow. So the information we've linked back when it goes yellow is a planning history. So what we can see here is this kind of this big parcel of land that's unregistered and obviously been owned since pre-1998 when that registration became compulsory. And actually, when I click that property, I can see it's 15 New Square. I can do my little split screen view so we can sort of see what it is we're looking at when we look at that. So here we are, this kind of lovely little run of houses in the centre of Cambridge. This lovely kind of view over the square, also the park in front of it. But what we've managed to do then with Nimbus Maps Elite is link that back to the planning history for that particular location. So there's been a planning application back in 2014 where there's kind of sort of the full application to change the dwelling, which is kind of extension of the dwelling, etc., etc. but then obviously the listed buildings consents that sort of sat alongside that. And I can then link across straight into the council website to go and see that application. Now, where that becomes really interesting is, of course, having found an application that relates to a building that's unregistered, I've then got the information that sits on that planning application to kind of give me a load of information around that particular building. So that's interesting in the case of if I look at the application form. So the application form here, if I click on that, I can then start to unpick and understand who owns that property through the application form itself. So the applicant name here is showing me that Jesus College Developments Limited actually own that particular property. So what was originally a black hole and have no idea who owned that, through Nimbus Maps Elite you can go and find that application, find the owner, and unlock then who is the sort of freeholder of that particular location or that particular property or area. And of course, with the link to that planning application, I can then find a load of information around the existing and proposed floor plans and this sort of stuff. So I can then understand what the building currently looks like, what they're planning to do with it, and this sort of stuff. And obviously from that, understand a fair amount of information around the particular property itself. So perhaps if I look at site plan or the floor plans or whatever, that then shows me kind of what the inside of that building looks like and how it's, in terms of what they've been trying to do with it, how that kind of fits together in effect. So what was originally of kind of a sort of a black hole now becomes quite interesting, and clearly that whole parcel of land I can kind of do the same up the street and probably find that that same that same applicant, Jesus College Developments Limited, has applied for those all the applications along that street, and therefore probably own the whole of that own the whole of that little block. In fact, there you go, Jesus College. So clearly that whole estate, then that kind of whole sort of piece there, is going to be owned by Jesus College. So kind of very quick and easy. And I suppose the other trick to this is actually you can also use the leases that have been granted. So those green pins that is shown on Nimbus Maps Elite and Essentials as well show the leases that have been granted. And actually from those, if you download a copy of those leases, you can then see who the freeholder is off that, or certainly who the freeholder was when the property was, when that lease was granted. So if that lease is a very, very old lease, if that lease, I suppose that lease has actually been will have been granted post 1998 because it's been registered with the land registry. So actually the freeholder from the lease, a party one to that lease, will actually still be the freeholder of that property. So that's kind of really interesting actually. Provided that lease is post 1998, pre 1998 you had it was voluntary registration, so you could register things, you didn't have to. Obviously now, if that lease is post 1998, then if the property had been sold after that lease was granted, obviously at the point the lease is granted, the party one is the freeholder, so therefore we know at the date of that lease the freeholder was who it was. If it had been sold since then, it's compulsory registration. You've got to let the land registry know, and of course then it would be outlined in red and it would be registered, and that would all be fine. Thanks very much. So provided that lease is post 1998, then you would then know that freeholder was is still the freeholder of that particular property. So kind of two ways in which you can dive into understanding whether a property is if the property is unregistered, who the freehold owner of that property is, either by the cheap version, which is kind of clicking on the U's, the yellow U's. Off the yellow U's, you can then look at the planning application. That will give you the applicant. The applicant then typically will be the landowner, or certainly have a route back to the landowner, or know who the landowner is, so you can find the trail of breadcrumbs back to the freeholder through that. Or alternatively, looking through the leases, understanding that lease post 1998 means the party one on that lease, the freeholder of that lease, the grantor of the lease in effect, will then be the freeholder of that site as well. So kind of very quick ways of finding out who owners are without having to get in the car and go and knock on the front door and ask them what who owns that building that's in there. So hopefully that's helpful. We do have a feature on the platform at the moment. There's a sort of chat and questions box on the right hand side of your screen. So if anybody's got any kind of questions they'd like me to look at, then by all means do pop those into the sort of the chat function on the right hand side, or do the questions section, and we'll try and answer those as best we can. So if anybody's got any, then please do pop those into the right hand side there, and we'll pick them up. Hopefully that's been helpful. I suppose some of the things that we do also do with that unregistered land is that we have the rates assessment linked back to it as well. So if the property is in commercial use, then chances are we'll have been able to link that. So that U, when you click on the U, if it's a commercial building, chances are we've been able to bring the rates assessment back onto that particular property as well. So you'd be able to see kind of, in this particular case, it's kind of a surgery down here, sort of on the lease, but the same would apply to the U. So this, I think, is probably residential property, so that's not going to have a rate assessment, obviously. But so in this case here, there is a rate assessment sort of linked to the lease, and of course that would then be the same on the U's, those unregistered properties, if they're in commercial use. So that's kind of a bit more information you can kind of dig around into on that particular on those particular properties. So hopefully that's been helpful. I think we probably won't go into huge amounts more detail. I'm very happy to share other things within the platform and sort of run through some of the things you can do with that. But if there are no questions, then I will just see if there are any more. No. Okay. If there's no questions, then we'll call it a day there. And I hope that's been helpful, and hope to see you soon. All the best.